Hey, sixth graders, we're going to revisit a topic that we've already addressed. But now that we have our algebra skills and we have a baseline understanding of, our algebra skills, we now are going to take a look at another way to solve proportions. Now remember, a proportion is an equation stating that two ratios or rates are equivalent or equal. So it's when we say that things like, and if we look at these examples, 24 miles in 6 hours per 6 hours is equivalent to 8 miles in how many hours if we were going at the same rate. So we took a look at using solving these using our equivalent fraction skills. And today we're going to take a look at how to solve these algebraically because we won't always be able to use our equivalent fraction skills, unfortunately. But let's go ahead and revisit how we can. When we have nice proportions, we can scale forward and scale back. And if you remember, scaling forward meant multiplying the top and bottom by the same number, and scaling back meant to divide the top and bottom by the same number. So if we take a look here, I'm comparing 24 and 8. To go from 24 back to 8, I'm dividing by 3. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the bottom. I'm going to divide by 3, and I get B equals 2 hours. If I take a look here, I can scale forward from 20 to 100 by multiplying by 5. So I'm going to multiply the top by 5, and I get that x equals 70. And if I take a look here, I'm scaling backwards by dividing by 6. So I'm going to divide 18 by 6, and I get m equals 3. So these are really nice, simple ones. But what happens if, let's say, we had gone from 24 not to 8 but to 10? Can you scale back from 24 to 10 nicely? Unfortunately, you can't, not using your multiplication and division skills. So this is where our algebra skills will come in. And we're going to do a thing called the cross product. Okay, so this is how it's going to work. You're going to set up your proportion and use your algebra skills to get the variable all by itself. Now remember, a fraction bar represents a division symbol. So to get rid of the variable, or excuse me, to get the variable all by itself, we need to use the inverse operation of division, which is multiplication. And we're going to go ahead and use a shortcut called the cross product to isolate that variable. So the cross product, what that does is it multiplies both of those denominators out of the bottom and gets them up top, and then we can solve for our variable. So I'm just going to kind of skip down to the example and show you how this works. So it turns out that if you multiply your diagonals together, that you get an equivalent statement. So if I multiply my 10 by my n, that will be equivalent to 4 times 22. Now let's go ahead and solve, because this is now a one-step equation. So I get 10n equals, and that's 88. We're going to go ahead and isolate by dividing both sides by 10. N equals 10 goes into 88 8 whole times, and there's 8 tenths, which is equivalent to 8 4/5. So as you can see, we couldn't have used our equivalent fraction skills because I can't go from 10 to 22 by using my multiplication. If that had been a 20, I could double it and n would have been 8, but that's not 20, that's 22. So that's where we have to use this idea of the cross product, and we need to multiply our diagonals and set them equal to one another, and then use our algebra skills to isolate n. Let's do another example. Can you go from 3 to 7 and using your equivalent fraction skills? The answer is no. So we're going to have to use this idea of the cross product, where we multiply our diagonals and set them equivalent to each other. So now I've got 7 times b is equal to 15 times 3. So that's 7b is equal to 45. I'm going to divide both sides by 7. To isolate b, 7 goes into 45 6 whole times. That gets us to 42, and there's 3 left over. So our answer is 6 3/7. And as you can see, you couldn't have gotten that mentally, and you can't use your equivalent fraction skills to get that either. And that's the beauty of algebra, is that it helps us solve problems like this. And the last one here, I can't go from 8 to 10 using my equivalent fraction skills. So we're going to have to go ahead and use this cross product. and set them equal to one another. So I have 10 times g is equal to 8 times 25. We get 10g is equal to 200. Divide both sides by 10. G is equal to 20. Now in class, I went through in depth on the board why this ends up working, and it turns out it's because, again, it's because you're multiplying both sides by the denominators to get them up out of the denominators, and then they cancel out on the side that they started out on. So that's why this works. I showed you the behind the scenes. I'm not too worried about you being able to replicate the behind the scenes. What I'm concerned about is I definitely want you to be able to use this process, this method called the cross product, to be able to solve for your variable. So why don't you go ahead, flip over, crank out the backside. You can check my scanned notes for the answer key. Should be on the website.